Going into today's episode, I was struggling on what to talk about. And then some major bombshell hit, and Boston College no longer has a head coach. We're going to get into that.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good evening, everyone. Locked On Boston College here with a special episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So, as I was saying, going into tonight, I was struggling. I was like, there's no recruiting news. Basketball's off. What are we going to talk about? I think of that Cody Rose GIF I used. What do you guys want to talk about? And then I'm putting my kids down for I was giving them a bath, and I see Pete Thamel's tweet go out. And I don't know if it was like this with you, Mitch. I was double checking like 5 times to make sure that was the right Pete Thamel. And it said Jeff Hafley is leaving Boston College to become the Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator. And I was stunned. And to talk about this, he's been here for almost the entire tenure of Jeff Hafley, is Mitch Wolfe of Eagle Insider. Mitch, how's it going?
Good. Props to you for your media literacy of actually checking to see if it was real. Because I was just like, oh, that's Thamel. That's definitely him. And I think the follow-up tweets from it really sold it for me. And then I was just like, and then I called you. I was like, did you see this? And you're like, busy right now. So we got to get something up on the site. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how much the phrase bombshell gets thrown around anymore, but I feel like this is as close a thing as you can get to a bombshell, especially given the timing, more so than the actual happenings, I guess.
So, yeah, if you went back a month and a half, you go back to the end of the regular season. And I think a lot of folks, right around Thanksgiving, especially after that Miami game, I think folks were like, oh, Jeff Hafley's going to get fired. This is the end of him. They went the month of November and they looked awful. And then you get he's still clearly on the staff. He's the head coach. You get to the Fenway Bowl and he shocks many people by winning that game. He starts killing it in the transfer portal, and you're starting to feel that good feeling again. And then this happens. And the funny part, and Mitch and I were talking about this earlier, Adam Brenneman, who I think was a tight end for Penn State.
And then UMass, yep.
And then UMass. And then he was a coach who I think got fired at Arizona State. Had a sit-down interview with Jeff Hafley that dropped this morning. And on it, if you got to look at the image too, he said, I think it says "now out" right over Jeff Hafley's head. But it's ironic because Hafley's talking on it about how much he loves Boston College and he wouldn't go anywhere else. And, he loves it here. And then boom, 12 hours later, he's gone. How surprised were you by this, Mitch?
I mean, floored, shocked, whatever word for that you want to use. I mean, I get we were completely blindsided by this. And again, I think most of that is the timing. It's because, a lot of other college football podcasts I listen to, they were kind of saying, oh, like now we're finally going to wrap up the coaching carousel. It's finally over now that kind of the shockwaves from Nick Saban retiring and Jim Harbaugh leaving, those kind of settled down. There's like, okay, time to move on. The coaching carousel's over, and then boom, sitting Power 5 head coach leaves for an NFL DC job. So, I think with I didn't get a chance to watch that Hafley interview. Now I probably won't, because it'll just make me upset. But I mean, given our conversations with Hafley, like he's always been kind of frustrated by this. And this is what was mentioned in the follow-up tweets from Thamel about how college football coaching is not as much about coaching football as it is about fundraising, NIL, blah, 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 blah. And he's talked about how crazy it is and how that needs to be reformed. And my personal opinion is that's why Tim Lukabu left last year to be an NFL position coach as opposed to a sitting college Power 5 coordinators, because it's significantly less work. And he could probably get a pay bump. I'm not sure if Hafley's getting a pay bump to be an NFL DC, but if you also think about it, whatever his money is in Green Bay goes a lot further than it does in Boston. So that's probably part of it too. And again, he has a lot less work to do, and the work that he does have to do, it focuses a lot more on actually coaching football as opposed to, traveling around the country, doing recruiting, doing fundraising, doing NIL call, doing all this other stuff that isn't football. And I know a lot of national reporters are talking about it today about how how coaches and athletic directors, everybody have been expecting this because the college football calendar is so crazy. It is a 365, 24/7 job. And a lot of that work again is not about actual football. So I think coaches are just getting tired of say, okay, you know, I'll take my notch down a bit to go to the NFL where I just get to coach football and I don't have to worry about all this other stuff. So
Yeah,
on the one hand, I get it. Like that makes a lot of sense. But so for him, it makes sense. I get it. But it obviously leaves BC in a really bad position given the timing.
yeah. I was talking to Brian Doan of 247 about this. So yeah, I called him immediately because I had talked to him an hour before the news hit about a potential new director of recruiting, and I was like, "Ooh, this is going to be good something to talk about." And then I was like, "Did you hear?" Because he's close with Jeff, like they knew each other at Rutgers, and he's like, "No," and he was saying like just kind of like you were saying like compare the lifestyle of a college football coach versus the NFL coach. He was like, when you're, what are most NFL coaches, assistant coaches doing right now? They're playing with their kids. They're at home doing nothing. They're just chilling right now. What are college coaches doing?
Well, to be fair, they're probably at the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Game, or something like that. But some of them are off. Yes, you're right.
Right. You might have a couple staff members there, but
Yeah.
look at BC staff. Every single one of them is on the road right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a different feel, and I totally get it. Like for these coaches, he's got two young kids. Like the change of what you can do versus as a head coach and a college coach versus what you're going to do in the NFL is completely different. It's just the timing is horrible.
And even think about the two. I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, but Alabama hired Mo Linguist, who was the head coach at Buffalo, to be, I think, just a defensive assistant. And they did this with another sitting head coach. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head. But they went from being or not Power 5, obviously, but they went from sitting head coach to being essentially defensive assistants. I don't even think they're coordinators at Alabama. And I think that's kind of part of it too, because even though, yeah, you're on the road recruiting, is like the head coach has to do all this other stuff with the NIL and the fundraising. And so that's even, a downgrade responsibility where you do get to coach more football, but there's still a ton of other stuff you have to do. So, again, we're seeing a lot of people talk about that. And I think that really pertains to Hafley. And I mean, and BC really just gets shafted here. There's really no other way to put it because, like we talked about it after the Pitt game that, we didn't necessarily want Hafley back after how the season was wrapping up, and they made the decision to keep him. And if they hadn't, they could have gone out and hired, some of the candidates they're probably going to be kicking around for this now. We're at this point, but they would have had some other candidates that are basically now off the table or very unlikely to be hired because some of them are set up at other programs that could be relatively comparable to BC. So why would they leave that job that they've been spending the last month or so, putting together to come to BC? Like it's just some of those guys are just off the table now. So this is, I don't necessarily think this is a mismanagement or lack of foresight from the administration. I'm sure you could argue, oh, like they should have seen this coming. They should have been prepared. It's like, I mean, again, we felt that Hafley was pretty locked in with, hitting the transfer portal really hard, coaching the bowl game, obviously, and all that stuff. Like, and he was still out recruiting. Like he was obviously very busy over these last few weeks. So I think they felt that he was pretty bought in too, and I think they said, oh, he's frustrated with some of these things about college football. Every coach is, and there's nothing much we can do about that, but we feel like that he's going to stay. And then this comes out, and I think that they're pretty. I mean, I'm sure they might have had a few days notice, or at least a day maybe, but yeah, I mean, they're probably just as surprised as us.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw Lewis Bond tweeting a broken heart emoji.
Cam Arnold responded to the same tweet and said, "Wow," I think. Excuse me.
Yep. And I think we'll talk later about that.
I was dealing with a former player today who was very surprised by this. I asked him if he had heard anything from the roster, and he said no. But some of the things I've seen on Twitter, which are from relatively unreliable sources, but people are saying that, and I would say that Arnold and Bond's tweets kind of go towards this, is that I don't think the roster really knew this was happening. I think they probably found out, if not when the rest of us did, probably not that much sooner, which really no other way to slice it. That's not a good look if that's what happened.
Yep. It's not an easy thing to do. And that's what, it's probably what happened. But we're going to be back in just a moment, and we'll talk a little bit about his tenure. Let's look at what Jeff Hafley did, where the program is compared now to where he started. We'll get into his 4 years at BC and talk a little bit about how the program looks. We'll get to that in a moment. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. If you're like me too, you fall asleep on the couch when you have 2 young kids that keep you up all night. And I usually like a nice hot coffee with my Super Bowl to keep me going. Now, FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the Super Bowl with a win or 2 or 3. Now you can bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but also FanDuel has bets for which player will score a touchdown. Do you think Deebo Samuel's going to score? Do you think Christian McCaffrey? Who do you think will score? You can get anytime score touchdown bets there and so much more. Now, new customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Locked On BC, AJ Black. This is so funny. I'm sure Mitch is having the same thing. The last 2 hours, I have been on social media and not even like scrolling. It's been people DMing me nonstop. And someone was saying that there was a group space. I think it was the burner accounts. They were saying I was going to be super sad or angry that Hafley was leaving. They thought that I would be upset. I'm upset with what we talk about in a little bit about what could happen with his roster. But I've said all along that I thought when Mitch and I did our season preview last week, when I said they were going to go 5-7 or 6-6, I thought he's going to be gone in November anyways. So this isn't like a huge thing. I just think the timing of it's awful. So do you have something, Mitch?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I think and we'll get into this, but like we can argue back and forth forever about, and then we will in just a bit, but we can argue about it ad nauseum as to how good of a coach he was, where he left this program, whatever. The fact remains is that the timing of this departure is the worst thing about it, and it is terrible. It is a terribly timed departure because the semester has started, players are enrolled, but they now have a 30-day window to transfer, which is going to be difficult. But even outside of that, I think there is going to be a massive exodus in the transfer portal, and that's partly Hafley's fault by when this timing happens. But again, there's a lot of external factors there. But we're going to argue about how good Hafley was, but this where we stand now is terrible for the pro. It's just absolutely awful because I just think a lot of guys that we thought were going to be very instrumental to helping this program maybe get back to 6-6 against a very difficult schedule upcoming this year are going to be gone. And I'm not sure when it's going to happen, but unless they, can swing a miracle with the next head coach, I'd be very concerned about losing a lot of talented players.
And we'll get into the search in a moment, but this is how this episode's going. It's just like random trains of thoughts. I expect and I hope this is not going to be a typical BC coaching search that drags on for weeks because they're going to get killed if that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Like you're going to lose guys in the portal. The best case scenario, and I have to imagine given the heat that Hafley had at the end of his last couple of years, they have ideas in their mind that they're going to reach out and make a decision quick because they have to be on top of this transfer portal stuff. Because if they get a guy in, they can get him in there, try to get the guys that are already in the portal to get their names out of there and try to prevent guys that aren't from doing it. So I think that's going to be super important. And my hope is that this search is like lightning quick, that Blake James goes very fast.
If Blake James doesn't have a hire by the end of next week, he needs to be gone too.
Yeah. This is so critical. So backpedaling here again. Let's go talk about what Jeff Hafley did. So Jeff Hafley came in 2020 and replaced Steve Adazio, who went 6-6 his final season. And he brings in Phil Dracovic. He brings in Frank Signetti and Tem Lokabu to run, as his big moment here to start the season. And right away, Jeff walks right into a hornet's nest as COVID-19 hits. And the football season basically goes from what you expected to this crazy, like everything has
literally unprecedented, like nothing we've ever seen before, and probably something we hopefully won't see again for a long time.
and in 2020, to his credit, that was for all of us that were stuck at home. You couldn't go out, you couldn't do much. Watching those games was a lot of fun. You had close you brought Clemson to the brink. They should have won that game.
Had UNC on the ropes too.
Yep.
I gave Notre Dame a game for a half, I would say.
Yep.
And Notre Dame was a playoff team that year.
They started the season off with a fun win over Duke.
Mm-hmm.
And Djokovic looks like a world beater for him. So he's got the program like looking good. There's no fans there, but they're looking good. And then he makes the move to decline a bowl. He does not send his team to a bowl. They decide to decline it, which I think a lot of folks were kind of bummed about, but they talked about how exhausting that season was. And I remember him talking about like binders and things of all the like protocols they had to follow and all this stuff. And it was just exhausting for the team. They just wanted to be with their families. So you end the first season with Hafley. You're feeling pretty good. You feel like things are going in the right direction, right?
Yeah, I think you lose Hunter Long to the NFL. You lose, I think, Isaiah McDuffie and Max Richardson and Max Roberts, but a little less significant of a player. Lose Max Roberts to the NFL, so you're bringing almost everybody back. You get in some whole offensive line is back. That's a really good group. You think, okay, it's going to be more of a normal season. You have normal progression. You bring in a recruiting class. Guys develop. I think the coaching staff was completely intact, so everything should improve. It looks like a pretty decent schedule to start the year. So think, okay, like let's take the step from 6-5. We get to the 8-win territory, and Hafley's got this program. To at that point, if that had happened, it would have been heights Steve Addazio never achieved.
Right, and so you go into the 2021 season. You got Phil Djokovic back, and it was a second game because they started against Colgate. They play UMass, and Djokovic goes down, and the rest of the season it felt like a fever dream. Like you bring in Dennis Grosel, who you saw at the end of the 2020 season. You think he's going to be okay, and everything kind of I don't want to say everything falls apart. Just all the expectations that we had going into 2021 were gone, and you leave the season, you feel like you were 6 and
well, then you get Djokovic back, you win 2 games, and then
right,
and then at the end of the year, then everybody gets sick, and a lot of injuries start
COVID.
Up
they were supposed to play ECU in the bowl game. I got in a fight with one of their podcasters. That was fun. You go back and find that.
Everybody in BC Twitter got in a fight with everybody on ECU Twitter.
Yeah, I feel like that was
good times.
If that wasn't a metaphor of the way this country is working, I don't know what is. But
to America's year,
basically. So you go to 2022, and this is where the sheen, the gloss over Jeff Hafley kind of goes away. He doesn't, whether he could or couldn't, given the state of NIL, he did not address anything with the offensive line after Alec Lindstrom, Zion Johnson, Mike Vrabel, Tyler Vrabel, and Ben Petrula leave. You bring in Christian. You have Mahogany left. He blows his knee out in some out of off the field activity. They try patching it with the guys that they have, and it's a disaster. One of the worst seasons I've ever seen.
And again, like I'm not gonna. I've always been a little willing to give Hafley a pass on that, mostly because that was the Murphy's Law. You were like everything that could go wrong. Everybody who could get hurt did get hurt, especially on the offensive line. Like even a guy like Finn Durstein, who began the season starter was okay, and then after 4 games he's out for the year. It's just like, and now we're on to guys like Nick Thomas and Jackson Ness. Like okay, well now it's just never going to happen. And Djokovic valiantly battles. Emmett Moorhead valiantly battles Zay Flowers is a disappointing in terms of results, but pretty good final season to become probably the most decorated BC receiver in program history. But I mean, yeah, just another just brutal year. And again, some of the stuff is not necessarily his fault, and it's just again, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. So I think a lot of coaches in that similar situation would not have had significantly better results.
And so you go to 2023. He finally goes out and hits the transfer portal. He brings in Logan Taylor and Kyle Hergel to try to fix the offensive line with the returning Christian Mahogany. He tries to bring in a quarterback. We could talk about that in a second. Thomas Castellanos, Kai Robichaux as a running back. He brings in a bunch of different guys, right? You look at the schedule. you have Holy Cross, you have NIU, you avoid playing Clemson, you avoid playing many of the schools that have been tough because the divisions are gone. You don't get Wake Forest, you don't get NC State.
It would have been great to have Wake Forest this year, honestly.
I know. Yeah, right. I know. So going into the season, you're feeling okay. And the first thing that happens, I was with Jeff for a lot of the summer, is we get to see Emmett Moorhead at ACC Media Day. He, is announced as the starter going into the season. He goes out for 2 drives and Hafley benches him, or whatever staff member.
That's right. Yeah.
It goes to the top. Hafley benches him and brings in Thomas Castellano, which stuns everyone. And to a lot of folks' point, if you had Thomas Castellanos out there to start and just got him juiced for that first game and maybe fixed the playbook to work with what he had, you probably should have beaten NIU. But whatever the hell they did, made them lose to the Huskies to start that off. And immediately, all that crap that you felt in 2022, it just cascades again into 2023. And it just continues at the beginning of the year. You should have lost to Holy Cross if what's his name, Sluka, doesn't make a unbelievably weird fumble. You would have beaten Florida State, but you're so sloppy that you had 18 penalties.
Program record penalties. Yep.
You get trounced by Louisville. And then they go on a 5-game win streak, and we're talking about the path, and all the good feelings are back again. It's like with Hafley, it was always a roller coaster. So you start off at the bottom, and you go up, and you're feeling good. You win 5 games, you're bowl eligible, everything's great. And then the month of November, it was right off that cliff again. Elijah Jones is gone, no one knows why, and they get the floor wiped with them by Virginia Tech and Miami, and then lose to a horrible Pitt team. So you're feeling bad again. Then you go to a bowl game and you beat a ranked team, and then all of a sudden you're feeling good going into the offseason again, and now he's gone. I think we just recapped all of Jeff Hafley's career.
We probably could have honestly gone for another hour just on that, because it's so roller coastery and crazy things happening. Like we don't even mention, and I think, well, the thing about Hafley's seasons is that I feel like all of them pretty much ended, kind of regular seasons at least, ended just with a whimper, where they just ran out of bullets at the end of the season. And, I think you could probably do a lot of investigations to why that happened. But that was definitely a current that ran through all the seasons. So, yeah, that's the thing, is like no season was ever dull, even though they all kind of, except for the 3-9 season, all of them kind of ended up the same way.
Yeah, the 3-9 season was awful. Covering it was awful. Talking about it was awful. I'm sure for you fans it was terrible. But every other season was always interesting. And you go to you could talk about his legacy too. We can get into that in a minute. Like, I want to hear your perspective on this, Mitch, because I think we disagree a little bit. From 2008, 2020 to now, do you think BC football, the moment he left, because it's going to be different in about a week, was in better shape than it was under Adazio?
I think that as the roster is currently constructed now, I would say yes, but that roster is going to drastically change in the coming weeks and months. I think when all is said and done, I would probably have to say that I do not think Hafley left Boston College in a better place than he found it. And that's pretty tough to say, because I think Steve Adazio left it. And honestly, did really Steve Adazio leave it in that bad of a situation where there was still a good amount of talent? I think Hafley did a decent job at maximizing a lot of that talent, to be honest. You think about guys like Hunter Long and Zay Flowers, and I know people didn't love Frank Signetti and Matt Applebaum in those seasons, but there was a pretty good offensive line. And he got 2 back-to-back first-round picks, first time that's happened at BC since Anthony Costanzo and Luke Kuechly, so pretty good there. You're gonna have another high draft pick in Christian Mahogany and some other draft picks this year. And I think the biggest difference is that, and this is just based on their personalities, and I've talked and written about this, that Steve Adazio established a strong identity for the program, particularly on offense, but I think his culture of the program was not as good. And I would say it was the opposite for Hafley, in that because of the weird 3-9 year and all the injuries and the other years, and obviously the COVID year. And again, a lot of these external things are just things that have really fundamentally changed the landscape of college football, whether it be the COVID year, whether it be the NIL situation and the changing of the calendar of college football, which again, not Hafley's fault. I think just he wasn't equipped well enough. And a lot of coaches weren't, honestly. He just wasn't well equipped enough to handle that to keep BC growing from where Adazio left it. Because, again, Dazio had the bad 3-9 year too, and that was, again, injuries and just kind of cycles of recruiting and what have you. But then he kind of built it back up. And again, it was frustrating that they couldn't break the 7-win barrier ever. But you kind of knew what you were going to get, I would say, a little more than with Hafley's teams. And again, the results were remarkably similar. But again, it was just so much of a roller coaster where you would have not high expectations. They would do something great, you'd raise your expectations, and then it would come crashing down to the floor and then cycle that through like 3 or 4 times a season. So, yeah, I think I'm just gonna say I don't think he left in a better place, and I think that's going to be especially true. And I think part of it that's going to be especially true because of when he left. I think that had he been fired after the Miami or Pitt game, I think there was honestly an argument to be made about him leaving in a better place, or at least it's kind of the same as where he found it. Now, with what's going to happen, I just think it's going to be really hard to make that argument. So, and again, I think part of it with Hafley is difficult for people in the media because he is so much better with the media. So people like us have a better relationship with him. So you might not want to criticize him as much. You can kind of see the explanations behind things. Whereas Adazio was so prickly. Granted, I wasn't covering the team back then, but Adazio was so prickly then that people didn't really give him any of the benefit of the doubt. Whereas with Hafley, because he had that different kind of personality, where the players did genuinely seem to like him, and I'm sure their feelings are different now, but you would give it the benefit of the doubt because he was a lot more savvy at dealing with that kind of thing. And eventually, I think just the whole, I do think the big reason behind him leaving is that he just doesn't want to deal with this college stuff anymore. And it's hard to blame him. And I did see some people saying like, he's leaving now because if he leaves after next year or gets fired after next year, because BC probably wouldn't do as well, he probably would be hired as a college defensive coach as opposed to an NFL one, or at least a coordinator. This is his chance to jump to be an NFL coordinator, which is a pretty good job. And frankly, from what I've heard from Packers fans, they really hated their last defensive coordinator. So I think they're going to love Hafley for at least 2 years just because he's not that guy. So, I think that at the end of the day, I think Hafley's probably a better person than Steve Adazio is. Maybe not as good of a football coach, which, again, we can have a philosophical argument as to which one you want to be.
Yeah. And I was going to say, like, we could all have a whole conversation on the last 4 years. I mean, one of the things you could narrate it as is Jeff Hafley learning on the job. So much of that was like him not understanding something, figuring it out. And, with Adazio, he had been in that. So his thoughts and his processes were stupid sometimes. And honestly, like Jeff leaving, I did a whole segment on this the other day with his go for it all the time on 4th down. I was loving that. But there were so many things I felt like it was like brand new for him. So in a moment when we talk about potential replacements, one name that's popped up, and I'll say it now, is Al Washington. I say to BC fans, yes, he's a favorite of yours, but you're going to get the exact same thing that you just got with Jeff Hafley, where he's going to learn on the job. Are you ready for that? Is that what you want? Because of all the things we just talked about, at least from my perspective, one current through this last 4 years was there were lots of things that Jeff Hafley had to learn as a new head coach. And I think in a moment when we talk about it, one of the things that BC needs to look for, and I know it's going to be tough because of where it's happening, is a head coach with experience. They don't want to wait to have someone come in and figure things out on the job. We'll be back in just a moment. This is Locked On BC, AJ Black. And before we get into our final segment, we're going a little long here because there's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of you out here. We have more listeners than I think I've had in any post-game discussion. Go over to Eagle Insider. I'll put the link up when Mitch starts talking in a moment. Right now we have a special Jeff Hafley's Gone 60% off sale. I don't know what else to call it. And while Mitch and I break down analysis, I have a big board up already of potential names that we could be looking at. I'll get player reactions, recruit reactions. You're going to get it all. 60% off. I think it's like $30 for the whole year. You're going to get all the news and be up to date on everything coming up. You're going to want to make sure you sign up today. This deal's only going to go for a couple weeks, so make sure you sign up. Now, the big news, now that he's gone, now everyone wants to talk about is what's next? Who's BC going to hire? And as I said earlier, they got to do it quick. This cannot be a national search that they hire, was it Gene DeFilippo's search committee and get a list and then just, break it down. And no, highlight your 2 or 3 guys that you want, bring them in, interview, hire on the spot. That's what they got to do. They cannot drag their feet and do a whole, hiring process on this whole thing. Just do it. So Mitch, I want to go into, let's talk a little bit about some names that Brandon Marcello brought up. I have my list up on the site, and some of those names that I can confirm I've heard BC's interested in, and Brandon doesn't have them here. So if you want to get a few of those names, they're up on the site. What names jump out to you?
Well, Bob Chesney's the big one. And a little behind the scenes, when we were towards the end of this past season, we were putting together some lists of guys that we thought BC would be interested in the event they did fire Hafley, which they obviously didn't do. And Bob Chesney was number 1 on our list. And I know he was on a lot of fans' lists going into the Holy Cross game, especially when BC was about to lose that game. And they ultimately didn't. And here we are. I'm a big fan of hiring Bob Chesney. And based on what we've seen about his buyout at JMU, if BC is willing to pony it up, maybe they can swing this. But Bob Chesney fits a lot of the qualifications I would want in the next head coach, because he has a lot of experience coaching New England, which I think the importance of that can be overstated. But the most important thing about him is that he has won everywhere he goes, and he has built up programs from not being good programs to being excellent programs at pretty much every level he's been at. Granted, he has not coached a game at the FBS level yet, but he has taken a Division III program from a losing team to one of the best in their conference. Same thing with a D2 team, same thing with an FCS team. The guy's a good football coach. And we saw that. I mean, he took BC to the brink this year, and, you can argue about how talented BC was. And I would argue that Holy Cross took a big step back from where they were last year, and they still had BC on the ropes. So I would really like Bob Chesney. I'm not sure if they're going to swing that because, again, where we are in the cycle. Jason Cannell from Toledo, interesting name, guy that has kind of been on a lot of lists as of late, like the last few years, just because he's been very successful at Toledo. One of the podcasts I listened to, I can't remember which one is off the top of my head. It actually might be Bud Elliott of 247, who's on the Cover 3 podcast. He has said that there's some concern that because Toledo is just operating at such a recruiting advantage over the rest of the MAC, that it's not really him coaching, it's just recruiting, which is important in the MAC, but it's not like the guy's just like a schematic genius, and that's why he's running through the MAC each of the last few years, which I think is part of the reason why I think they've been in the MAC championship the last few years, but they haven't won it. They've gotten beat out by kind of just other hot teams. Todd Monken, Ravens OC. I find that hard to believe. I think Monken's, again, the Ravens had a really good year, obviously bad result in the AFC championship, and Monken didn't have his best game, but I don't really see that happening. Jeff Monken at Army, I would be interested in. I know that they've kind of fallen on some hard times recently, but I mean, he really got that program turned around when he showed up. Had them basically got them to be beating Navy, which is a big deal. And they had I think they had a 10-win season, maybe 2. Mike Reed, Clemson special teams coach. Gotta be honest, don't know much about him. Liam Cohen, Kentucky OC.
BC. He has a BC connection.
Okay, all right.
I think he went to BC.
Okay, well, okay. Wouldn't mind kicking the tires there. Liam Cohen, Kentucky OC. I am very worried about Liam Cohen. I think he's from Massachusetts, or he went to UMass. One of the two, maybe both. He has been going and back and forth between the NFL and college a lot in the last few years. And I think he's getting NFL interviews actually now as Kentucky's OC. And I don't think his results are that good, and I don't want the same thing to happen. And he's also never been head coach, so he doesn't have experience there. The other one's Al Golden, which we've kind of debunked because Blake James fired him, and then Al Golden Blake James fired him at Miami, and then Al Golden sued him. So don't think that relationship has been mended. Some of the other names we've seen, Bill O'Brien, which a lot of people think that there's been some smoke there. I could see it. The big thing I wanted to debunk is I'll have to think of a bet to do or something, but I think it's impossible that Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel take this job. Why would any of these guys, again, Hafley left because college is so much more work than the NFL, and a lot of it does not have anything to do with football. Carroll maybe because he has this weird old man energy and he can do the recruiting, but he hasn't been in college for a long time. And the last time he was in college, he got ran out because he was committing recruiting violations. So, and maybe he doesn't do that now, but whatever. Bill Belichick does not want to do all the crap about college recruiting and NIL and all that stuff. That's like, come on, what are we talking about?
Yeah, he's gonna have a cush.
Also,
media
like,
jobs.
also I know that some of our New England fans are gonna maybe prickle at this, but like, how is he doing since Tom Brady left? Maybe he's not the greatest coach, without the greatest quarterback of all time. And Vrabel maybe because he's a little younger, but again, like I think he thinks he deserves to be an NFL coach, and I think he's right. So why would he take the step down to college? I think that also applies to Brian Flores, who, yeah, sure, he played at BC a long time ago, but he's currently suing the NFL because he believes he's been screened against for being head coach, and I think he believes he should be an NFL coach. And frankly, I think he got really screwed over in the Miami situation, so I think he probably deserves another shot as an NFL coach. Going back to college would be a significant step down.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Now you got me derailed with the comments. That is a demotion in his mind. Again, a lot of what college football coaching now is sucking up to old rich white people who for their money, which is exactly what he didn't do at Miami, Stephen Ross, and that's why he got fired. So I don't think he's going to want to come back to college, and he's never even coached in college at all. He went right from playing at BC to I think a scouting internship with the Patriots, and then turned that into a coaching career. So he's never coached in college, which again, college is not so much different from the NFL now, but it still is. And he doesn't have any experience with it whatsoever. So don't expect those hires. I find them very unlikely. I think this coach is going to come from the college ranks, and I'm hoping that it is going to be a person who has college head coaching and college head coaching winning experience.
Can we just talk though, like hypothetically though, with Bill Belichick, if we got to go to a press conference and ask Belichick questions, get him on the podcast?
Yeah, I mean that'd be sick, but
sorry.
So would getting Nick Saban out of retirement. And I think those two are about as equally likely as of happening.
So my hope is that Blake James has a list in front of him now, and has already made calls to agents because we need to get this process going quickly. And
we should talk
Brandon
to Peter Caruso. Peter Caruso in our comment section has an extensive list of names.
Yep.
Anybody who's ever been a head coach in college football.
Jim Grobe,
Paul Johnson, George O'Leary. Is George O'Leary alive?
I don't even know. And he had one earlier that I lost it. He had one earlier.
He also wants to hire head coaches who are basically criminals. He's suggested Mel Tucker. He suggested Pat Fitzgerald. He suggested Urban Meyer.
Les Miles.
I'm sure Father Leahy would love some more of those pictures that we've seen of Urban Meyer. Love to see him down at City Side on the weekend.
Yeah. So should the torch be?
George O'Leary is alive, so that's good. I'm glad he is.
Should the torch be passed to either Paul Rhodes or Rob Jasinski? I could tell you. Okay, so first of all, Chud took a job with BC so that he didn't have to recruit. He had what Mitch was talking about earlier, where he just, they have why am I like Steve Shimko as the offensive coordinator, and he did all the if following me on Twitter and the readings that I put, the articles I put up, every single person on the road does not talk about Rob Jasinski. They talk about Steve Shimko. So Chud is in that same bucket as Tim, as in Jeff. He's done with the college football coaching life. No. And I don't think Paul Rhodes isn't out that much either. I don't think he's going to do it. So,
and it's not like he was exceptionally successful before. So yeah, I don't know. Dan Mullen's getting thrown around a lot. Obviously has New England connections. I'd give him a call, obviously, but I think he's in because he is obviously more connected to the college game and has had success, and specifically has had success at a, don't everybody freak out when I say this, a quote stepping stool program like Mississippi State, where he is more focused on the development of players and finding edges in scheme as opposed to just hammering the recruiting and stuff all the time. But the problem is now, regardless of where you are recruiting all the time. And maybe he's just like, I don't really want to do that, so I'm going to stick in TV and play golf with Matt Barry every weekend and have a little fun, cry on every time we call a game. We're saying, what's our golfing record against each other? I think he's probably got a pretty sweet gig going right now. So I would definitely give him a call, see if he's interested, get his number, what number he wants to be paid. And if he's willing, I'd love to have him. I think the tea leaves with him are saying would not be interested.
And as I
or
said
at least
earlier,
not be interested because his number might be too high that BC wouldn't want to pay it.
Right. And as I said earlier, Al Washington, no, I don't want him yet. He is not BC is not a program that needs another guy learning on the job. And I'm going to say this one now because he's become the darling of BC fans. And I saw people tweeting at him about this. Absolutely not with Will Blackman. I don't know why everyone is obsessed with him
It's
now.
because it's Dion. It's because it would be our Dion.
Yeah, we don't have the NIL funds.
And because that went super awesome in its first year, right?
Right.
I was told they would be only a few point underdogs against the 2019 LSU team. So I imagine they won the Natty, right? Colorado this year?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
They definitely made
okay, yeah, I get it. Yeah.
How about
Scott Frost? Man, talk about a fall from grace. Probably not.
Yeah.
It's not like I think the academic requirements at BC would be a bit of a struggle for him, given that the previous schools he was at academically did not have as stringent of requirements. So one name I did see from somebody I think on our board mentioned was Chris Creighton from Eastern Michigan, who's done a very good job of taking that program from the absolute dumpster, where that's like the team you pick in NCAA 14 to rebuild from nothing.
Yep.
And they're consistently winning bowl games, but he kind of gives me some Daz vibes, both for good and for bad.
Didn't his whole team get in a massive fight at the end?
Yeah, so one player attacked the other player that of the other team that beat them in the bowl game, and then that player got his what handed to him because he tried to fight a team after game and tried to fight the whole team by himself. But I think that he's kind of in the same thing as Frost, where it's like Eastern Michigan relies a lot on JUCOs and stuff like that. And I know BC got their first JUCO football player that I can remember this year, but I don't know if that would work out as well.
Yeah. Going through our comment section. What about Peter? Come on. What about Bobby Petrino? All right. Next, Justin. Here's another one that name that's popped up, and I've heard he's Justin Fry. An Indazio guy. He's at Ohio State right now. He's offensive line coach or co-head coach, I think.
I'm not sure how that changed with Bill O'Brien, which we talked about Bill O'Brien, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. So I think that's possible. Again, there were some rumblings that he was
assistant head coach for offensive line coach.
Yeah. Okay. And Justin Fry, did he play at BC? No, he played at Indiana. He was just the O-line coach from 2013 2017.
Yep.
So I mean, maybe he hasn't, but again, hasn't been a head coach. Basically just been a Daz guy the whole time.
I'll leave this one to you. Bowling Green looks solid. What about Scott Loeffler?
Oh my God. I will say he has got them playing well last few years, but man, I just don't really like Scott Loeffler and his offense. So I would not be thrilled about that.
All right, continuing down our list, this is not Peter Caruso. This would be a controversial pick.
Peter Caruso did suggest this earlier.
But he's a
and also
winner
he won he had one winning season every few years and then would be terrible in the interim, and again also just got fired for a hazing scandal and was pretty I think he's still suing the school, so he thinks he's still in the right. So not my favorite choice.
And folks,
and the guy that they hired,
we've had some issues with offense at Boston College. Have you watched what Northwestern, even the years they were good, their offense was awful. It was one of the worst offenses I've ever seen. And I think they just fired Adazio's former OC in the last year or two. What the hell is his name? Bajakian. Yeah. So I'm all set with Pat Fitzgerald.
Yeah. I mean, they did better this year, their best year since the COVID year. With the guy that replaced Fitzgerald as kind of just the interim they had on staff because they had another weird timeline firing. So no, I would not be interested in Pat Fitzgerald.
Yep. And then our last comment before we go, bring back Jags or Spaz. We can always bring this up again. Jeff Jagosinski's not coming back for the 100th time. I've covered BC since 2010, and every year it's Jag should be back. And I'm not going down that road again of explaining why he doesn't have a job.
Boston College could burn, the entire campus could burn to the ground, and the college say, we're not coming back, we're shutting our doors, and people would say, when are you going to hire Jeff Jagosinski to be the head coach? No matter what, it's always going to happen. So we might as well just accept it.
So, Mitch, we went 44 minutes. let's wrap things up. Where can people find your work?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE, on Twitter. And obviously, Eagle Insider's going to be bumping for the next few days. So make sure you sign up. It's going to be a wild few weeks. Again, hopefully they get a new head coach soon. And if they don't, then some more heads need to roll, because this is
Crucial.
regardless of regardless of anything, this is a crucial moment for the program, because I think regardless of who you hire, it's going to be a rough 2024. But if you can make the right hire, you can right the ship, keep some of the guys that might want to leave, and maybe, be better prepared to make 2025 actually worthwhile.
All right. And you can follow me at AJ Black 247. Again, I just put the link. I'll put it back in the comment section again. Sign up right now, 60% off. You can see the big board. I have names on there that they don't have. As I said, Al Golden is not, I don't think, a viable candidate. But there is one name that we did not talk about that's up there that I've heard good buzz about. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247 right now. Go over there, get on that, get on Eagle Insider. And Mitch and I may be back multiple times coming up soon. So make sure you subscribe at YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit the like button before you head out. And thank you so much for listening to Locked On Boston College, your team every day.